Stargirl, episode 5, back in summer school, one more again. We will call this one Eclipso. Although it's Eclipso, this episode starts with Cindy. It shows you a scene where she was with her mama, and she was a little kid, she was a little girl, and she woke up and she had a nightmare because she was just like, oh, daddy's coming to get me. And then the mom was just like, oh, don't worry, honey, I'll protect you from your father. He can't hurt us. And then as soon as her mom left the room, her daddy came out the shadows. So I was like, the shade probably had something to do with that. And then that's when he snatched up Cindy and did the experiments that turned her into the Sheev. So, but Cindy, she's still on her recruiting mission. And in this particular episode, she's going after Icicle Jr. And she sees him across the street. She sees him painting on the walls and doing his artistry. So she's making preparations to go run up on him and to go to talk to him. She's looking at him from across the street. And right before she decides to actually confront him, the boy's grandmother shows up, because, like, remember the grandmother and the grandfather from season 1, like, I guess they're like Russian or Soviet or whatever. So they run up, like the grandma runs up on Cindy and she was just like, oh, niet. She's like, don't even try it. She's like, your father was a piece of slime and do not touch my grandson. And then, she was just like, I could talk to whoever I want. And then, she was just like, oh, she's like, your father was evil and, so you're just as evil. And then she was just like, well, first of all, your son was a piece of, what she said, she was like, your son was a piece of icicle trash who got run over by a station wagon driven by a 12-year-old boy. And then the grandmother's eyes lit up and frost breath started coming out of her mouth. And I was like, okay, so it's not just Icicle who had these magic powers. Apparently this ice shit runs in the family. Like the parents have icicle powers. Maybe they did experiments on them like back in the day during the war, but the icicle power basically like runs through the family bloodline. So obviously, like the kid's got to have powers too. That's why he's Icicle Jr. And the funny thing about him, like he's supposed to be a high school student. He's supposed to be a high school kid. That boy's voice is deep as hell. And it's so awkward whenever he has a conversation with Corey, just based on how grown he sounds with his voice. But, he's in school and he's talking to the art teacher, surprise, surprise, because, he's an artist and he's having a conversation with an artist. Cindy then rolls up on him in the art room where, like, because he was there because the teacher had convinced him, because the teacher saw him doing his artwork outside on the street painting on the walls. But then the teacher told him, he was like, yo, why don't you just come into the school and you can do your stuff like in a real studio and in a real canvas, and then we can, he's like, I can kind of like mold you a little bit and like give you some pointers and everything. But while he was talking, then Cindy showed up, and then Cindy was Cindy Berman, everybody calls her Berman. And then she was just like, oh, I'm sorry to hear about your dad and everything. And then he was like, first of all, bitch, when we were in school, he said, when we were in 4th grade, I remember when your mom died. And when your mom died, you actually said to everybody, you were like, I'm glad she's dead. So you didn't even have remorse for your own mama. So don't sit up here and try to tell me you feel sorry for me that my dad is gone. He's like, you don't give a damn about me, or you don't care about my dad. And then she got mad, and then that's when like the knife started slowly like coming out of her wrist, and and then just then that's when the teacher had came in and like interrupted them or whatever, and then then Icicle Jr. got mad and he was like, yeah, I'm going back outside to paint on the streets. And then like the teacher, he was like, hey, Miss Berman, like welcome back. And then Cindy, because she was tight, she took the Eclipse, she took the black diamond, and she used Eclipso to basically get a stronghold on the art teacher, and he possessed the art teacher. So Eclipso was talking to the art teacher, and he was like, I'm your muse now. And then he was like, I want you to paint the imagery of pure perfection. So now the kid starts, now like the teacher starts painting whatever Eclipso was telling him to paint. Stargirl and the gang, they're trying to track Eclipso by using the weather, because Pat had said that every single time Eclipso comes someplace, he leaves a trail of like darkness and like dark clouds behind. So, and then he was like, if you check the news reports, he said that all the towns surrounding Blue Valley are reporting sunny skies and and nice weather. He said, but yet there's a dark cloud over Blue Valley. So he's like, if we track the weather, we'll find out the exact location of where, of where Eclipso is, and then we can go stop them. So now everybody's trying to keep their eyes on the weather. They're trying to, they're trying to track the whole thing. Beth is trying to, talking to Pat about Dr. Mid-Nite, and then she's like, oh, he could be alive. And then, Pat thought she was crazy, but then Rick was like, but what if he is alive? And then he was like, well, if it's true, then we'll do what we got to do. Barbara got another visit from the Shade. who ran up on her and was just like, oh, your daughter is sniveling, is putting her nose into my business, and eventually she's gonna turn up with some answers that she doesn't want. So, I mean, the Shade, like, he's not a dummy, because he knows that the kids are investigating, and he knows that the kids are all up in the business. So instead of him trying to prevent them, from doing what they're gonna do, he was like, well, shoot, they might stumble on some information that I might need. So he told Barbara, he was just like, hey, I'm here to warn you, Barbara. He was just like, when your daughter finds out the information she needs about the Black Diamond, he was like, I want you to tell me immediately, and then she was just like, why should I trust you? And then, he was just like, you can't. But, but the funny thing, when he was talking to Barbara, he had said that, he was like, oh, your feistiness reminds me of somebody. And then she was just like, oh, don't do to me what Icicle did and try to, like, use me as like some prize. And he was like, no, you misunderstand, dear. He was like, the person you remind me of is family. Like I said before, his whole purpose of trying to take down Eclipso is because the little girl that died that he killed, that was his grandson, and Dr. Mid-Nite married his daughter. I'm telling you, that's the whole thing. Either that or the little girl was his sister, and he was just a boy, like when his sister died. But anyway, he's obviously talking about the girl, like the girl related. So, so then he told Barbara, he was just like, oh, look at my card again, it has my information. And then he was just like, oh, when you're a gang of miscreants, to track down the information, just let me know. And then he disappeared because he's the Shade. Then Courtney ends up bumping into, she ends up bumping into Icicle Jr. The two of them have a conversation. He ends up bringing her back to the house, and then they were talking about like their future plans. And then Yolanda texts Courtney, and she was like, yo, bitch, like, he found some information about, about Eclipso, and we got some weather information. You need to bring your behind down here right now. So then Courtney ends up leaving, and then Icicle's like, you always leave me, Courtney. And I was like, really, dude? And then she was just like, this is the last time. And I'm like, bullshit. And then, so then Courtney goes down and team up with the rest of the people. Mike, at one point, he had got in trouble because he tried to buy a car for like $50. And then he said that he thought that he could use it as like a getaway vehicle for the JSA. And then Pat was just like, look, dude, he was like, obviously you want to help and you're trying your best to be a part of something. He was like, so what I'll do for you, he was like, I'll find a JSA project that you and I can work on together, and then his son got all excited and he was just like, yo, thanks, Dad, because his voice was like everybody's puberty kicked in like over like over the school year, because he got a deep voice too, so now he's happy and like he's off to the side. So Pat's on his way down, because they ended up tracking the weather signature to the school, because since Eclipso had got its clutches onto the teacher, there was a dark cloud surrounding surrounding the school. So now the JSA, they're at the school, they're still waiting for Pat. But then Courtney noticed that the art teacher's car was still there. So she was just like, yo, your man's car's still here. So he has to be in there and something has to be wrong. So she was like, we can't wait for Pat. And then they go rushing in there to go find out what's going on. When they go in there, Eclipso basically took control of everyone's mind except Courtney, because he can't corrupt Courtney because Courtney has the staff. And Eclipso was pure darkness, and how do you kill pure darkness? You use the light. But unfortunately for the other three, it didn't work out because he made Yolanda see the faces of Brainwave and Brainwave Jr., and she was like overwhelmed with the guilt because Eclipso was like, you're responsible for both their deaths, and then Rick ended up seeing Solomon Grundy, and then he was just like, oh, who's the monster? Is it Solomon or is it you, Rick? And then Beth, Beth saw like a tore up picture of her parents, and he was just like, oh, your home is broken and there's nothing you can do about it. And for the love of God, can we get Beth a new costume, please? So, so then the three of them, they were incapacitated. Courtney went after, she went to go find the teacher. She found the teacher, and then her and Eclipso got into a fight. They got into like a light versus dark battle, and then Courtney figured out in that moment that the only way to save this dude and the only way to expel the darkness was to use the light. So she told the guy, she told the teacher, she was like, oh, touch the staff, touch the light. And then he ended up touching the staff, and the staff was powerful enough to propel him out of out of the shadows, and Eclipso basically was defeated in that moment, and Eclipso ran off. So now they kind of know how they're supposed to defeat him. they know, and and there's a reason why. I mean, I guess there's a reason why Eclipso don't come out in the daytime, but but that's the thing, and I like to see what they do with that information going forward, because now that they managed to stop him temporarily, like they just can't let that go. Like there has to be like a bigger and better way to for this whole entire thing to work. And then the other three, they were just sitting there trying to like pick up the broken pieces. Beth had a conversation with her parents, and then everybody else was just kind of like just thinking about everything that's going on. And then it takes us to a scene with Cindy and the new ISA, because they showed like Artemis and they showed the fiddler's kid, and then Artemis was just like, oh, I thought you was gonna get Icicle Jr., like what happened? And then she was like, oh, don't worry about it, he's a bitch. And then she was like, we don't need him anyway. She was like, trust me. She's like, I got this. So, so they got 3 members now, but Cindy said that they're still trying to get the final member, which is Pat's son. So I guess in the next episode, they're going to run up on Pat's son, and this is going to be a very interesting thing. And I feel like the black kid who now has the magic pink pen, he's going to show up in that episode as well. And then in the final scene, Icicle Jr., he was outside doing his painting thing, and then all of a sudden, like his hand or his arm started hurting. He dropped his paintbrush, and then when the paintbrush hit the ground, we saw that the paintbrush had turned to ice. So now his powers were really starting to kick in, and I feel like his grandmama got something to do with that as well. So that was it. And thank you for tuning in. And this is pretty interesting because we're still on the fence about whether or not, I mean, I believe the Shade when he says he's trying to destroy Eclipso. Because, like, I mean, again, the little girl who died was either his little sister or that was his granddaughter. And I do feel like there's a double cross coming. Like, he may not be trying to team up with Eclipso, but that doesn't mean the Shade doesn't want to get the Black Diamond for himself, because the Shade's power, he has the power of like manipulation and everything, but the Shade also has like the power of the darkness and the Shadow Realm as well. So maybe he's trying to expunge Eclipso from the diamond and use his own power in the diamond instead. But I said, like, the Shade is a villain, so even if he helps them, save Blue Valley, there's gonna be a double cross somewhere in the woodworks, which is why Pat told them flat out, like, yo, we're gonna try to resolve this, and we ain't gonna ask the Shade for no help. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with the ISA, because I don't think Cindy has enough members at this point to launch a full-scale assault, and there has to be at least one person on this team who isn't like a child of an ex like JSA member. There has to be one kid in the town that's just a straight up like bad child that Cindy can recruit to take the place of Icicle Jr. But we will find out as the weeks and seasons progress. But so far so good. I'm liking what's happening, and I can't wait to see the whole thing unfold. So thank you for tuning in. Leave your questions, comments, and or concerns down below. Hit the notification bell so you get notified when my next Stargirl episode comes out, as well as my other episodes of DC TV reviews and a little bit of Marvel as well. Check me out on Twitter. Check me out on Instagram. As always on YouTube. Leave your thoughts, your questions, and everything, and I'll answer back to you guys as quickly as possible. So thanks for tuning in, guys. So until next week, as we recover some more summer school madness, take care. And for Eclipso, I'm out this bitch.